Which street? Ah. Are they putting in a roundabout over there? Okay. They've gone around about Happy and Blue Ash. Yeah. Hi. We'll start. Yes, indeed. So Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We'll get started here in our Siddur on page 10. And I'll welcome everybody as they come in. Shabbat Shalom. We're on page 10. We'll begin with Yedid Nefesh. And if folks need to chat, that's fine. If folks want to chat in the lobby, that's absolutely fine. And we'll get started. We're on page 10. Yedid nefesh av harachaman mishoch avdach eretzonach yarutz avdach kmo ayah yishachaveh mul hadarach ki yerav lo yedidutach minofet suf vechotam hadur nae ziv haolam nafshi cholat avatach ana el narefana lach beharot lach noam zivach Asitchazek v'titrapei v'hayatalach shivchat olam v'tik yehemu rachamecha v'chusna al ben ohavach ki ze kama nichsof nichsaf Lirop tiferet uzach Ana ili mahmad libi Chushana ve'al titalam Higalena ufros chaviv alai Et sukat shelomach Ta'ir eret mikvodach Nagila v'nismecha bach Mahirahu kivamoed V'choneini ki me'olam Yadadai dai 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 Yadadai dai 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 Yadadai dai 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 Yadadai dai dai Yadadai dai 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 Yadadai dai 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 Yadadai dai 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 Yadadai dai dai Yadadai dai 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 Yadadai dai 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 Yadadai dai 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 Yadadai dai dai Yadadai dai 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 Yadadai dai 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 Yadadai dai 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 dai. Pages 11 and 12, we'll read Psalm 95 individually. We'll start together. L'chon eranena l'Adonai nari al-tzor yishteh נקדמה פניו בתודה, בזמירות נריה לו. ארבעים שנה כות בדור, ואומרם תועל לבבהם, והם לא ידעו דרכי, אשר נשבעתי ואפים יבואון אל מנוחתי. Page 13. שירו לאדוני שיר חדש, שירו לאדוני כל הארץ, שירו לאדוני ברכו שמו, בסרו מיום ליום ישועתו, ספרו בגויים כבודו, בכל העמים נפלאותיו, כי גדול אדוני ומהולל מאוד, נורא הוא על כל אלוהים, איי די די, כי כל אלוהי העמים אלילים, ואדוני שמיים עשה, הוד והדר לפניו עוז ותפארת במקדשו, הבו לאדוני משפחות עמים, הבו לאדוני כבוד ועוז, הבו לאדוני כבוד שמו, זו מנחה ובאו לחצרותיו, אילי השתחוו לאדוני בהדר קודש, חילו מפניו כל הארץ, אמרו בגויים אדוני מלך, אף תיכון תבל בעל תימות, ידינמים במישרים, ישמחו השמיים ותגיל הארץ, ירם הים ומלואו, יעלו שדי וכל אשר בו, אילי אז ירננו כל עצי יער לפני אדוני, כי בא לשפוט הארץ, ישפוט תבל בצדק ועמים באמונתו, אילי Let's try this one responsively on pages 15 and 16. I have a mic.
Adonai reigns, let the earth be glad, the many distant lands rejoice.
Clouds and thick darkness surround the divine, righteousness and justice secure God's throne. Fire goes before God, consuming besiegers round about.
Flashes of lightning illumine the land, the earth watches and trembles. Mountains melt like wax at the approach of Adonai, at the approach of the master of all the earth.
The heavens tell of God's righteousness, and all the nations see God's glory.
Worshippers of idols be shamed for praising false gods. All that is redeemed supreme bow before God.
Zion hears of it and rejoices. The cities of Judah exult as you, Adonai, pass judgment.
You, Adonai, are above all that is earthly, exalted over all that is worshipped as divine.
Those who love Adonai hate evil. God protects the lives of the faithful, saving them from the hands of the sinful.
Light is sown for the righteous, and joy for the upright. Rejoice in Adonai, you righteous people, and thank God as you pronounce the divine holy name.
Thank you. Pages 17 and 18, we'll read this one individually. Mizmor shir l'Adonai shir chadash, ki nivlo rasa hoshia lo yamino uzrachacho. לפני אדוני קיווה לשפוט הארץ, ישפוט תבל בצדק ועמים במישרים. And on pages 19 and 20, we'll read this one individually, but we'll conclude together with Romamu on page 20. Adonai malach yirgezu amim yoshev keruvim tanut haaret. Moshe. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lahar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lahar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lahar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lahar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. We're on page 21. We're continuing with Psalm 29, Mizmor LeDavid, page 21. Mizmor LeDavid, havu l'Adonai b'nei elim, havu l'Adonai kavod va'oz, havu l'Adonai kavod shemo, ishtachavu l'Adonai behadrat kodesh. Kol Adonai al hamayim el hakavod hirim, Adonai al mayim rabim. Kol Adonai ba'koach, Kol Adonai behadar, Kol Adonai shover arazim, Vaishaber Adonai et arzei alvanon, Vayarkidem kmo egel Levanon, Vesirion kmo ven re'emim. Kol Adonai Kol Adonai Yachil Midbar, Yachil Adonai Midbar Kadesh. Kol Adonai Yachol Elayalot, Vayechesof Ye'arot, Uvehechalo Kulo Omer Kavod, Kulo Omer Kavod. Adonai Lamavu Yashav, Vayeshev Adonai Melech Leolam, Adonai Oz Le'amo Yitein, Adonai Yevarech et Amo V'Shalom. And we turn to page 23 to continue with Chadodi. We'll do two melodies for the first 5 and last 4 stanzas, respectively. Not the same one we did last time. Let's see. That's the one I did last time. Hang on, no. Lech Adodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, hishmi'anu el ha'miuchad. Adonai echad u'shmo echad, b'shem u'tiferet v'letila. Lech Adodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה כי היא מקור הברכה מראש מקדם נסוכה סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה מקדש מלך עיר מלוכה קומי צאים מתוך ההפכה רב לך שבט בעמק הבכה והוא יחמול עלייך חמלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה התנערי מעפר קומי לבשי בגדי תפארתך עמי על יד בן ישי בית הלחמי קורבה אל נפשי גאלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה התעוררי כי באורך קומי אורי אורי שיר דברי כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לא תבוש ולא תקלמי מה תשתוכחי ומה תמי בך יחסו עניי עמי ונבנתה עיר אל תילה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה והיו למשיסה שוסייך ורחקו כל מבלייך יסיס עלייך אלוהייך כמסוס חתן על כלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה ימין ושמאל תפרוצי ואת אדוני תריצי על יד איש בן פרצי ונשמחה ונגילה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה גם בשמחה ובצלה תוך אמוני עם סגולה בואי חלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה. We'll continue on page 27 with Mizmor Shir, Psalm 92, and we'll do this one individually except for the end. Mizmor Shir liyom Shabbat tov le'adod Adonai. Tzadik katamar yifrach kerez balevanon yizkeh shetulim beveit Adonai bechatrot Eloheinu yafrichu od yenuvon beseva desheinim verananim lehagid ki yashar Adonai tzuri velo avlatavo Adonai malach geud lavesh Adonai ozi nazar מקולות מים רבים אדירים משברי ים, מקולות מים רבים אדירים משברי ים. אדיר במרום אדוני, אדיר במרום אדוני, אדיר במרום אדוני, אדיר במרום אדוני. עדותיך נאמנו מאוד, לביתך נבע קודש אדוני לאורך ימים. Warner's Kaddish Yatom is on page 30. If you're reciting Kaddish, please join me at this time. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmeich Rabbah. Ba'alama divra kirutech ve'amlich malchutech b'chayechon u'vyomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala u'bizman kariv ve'imru amen. Yahei shmeich Rabbah mevarach la'alam u'lolamei alamaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnasei v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shmeich v'gudsha b'richu la'ela min kol birchata v'shirata dush b'chata v'nechamata da'amiran ba'alama v'imru amen. Yahei shalama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mramafu ya'asei shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Our service continues on page 39A with our formal call to worship. Baruch Hu, please rise. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bidbaro ma'ariv arvim b'chokhmah. Umavir yom umehivi layla umavdil bein yom uvein layla Adonai tzvaot shemo el chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai ha'ma'ariv arvim. Ahavat olam Beit Yisrael amachavta Torah u'mitzvot chukim u'mishpatim otanu limadta Al kein Adonai Eloheinu b'shachveinu v'kumeinu nasiach b'chukecha v'nismach v'divrei Toratecha ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ואורך ימינו ובהם נהגה יומם ולילה יומם ולילה ואהבתך תסיר ממנו לעולמים ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך והיה Adonai Elohechem Emet. Let's read together in the English on page 43a before we go on to 44 in the Hebrew. This is our enduring affirmation binding on us, that Adonai is our God and there is none other, and we, Israel, are God's people. God is our sovereign, redeeming us from earthly rulers, delivering us from the hand of all tyrants, bringing judgment upon our oppressors and just retribution upon all our mortal enemies, performing wonders beyond understanding and marvels beyond all reckoning. God places us among the living, not allowing our steps to falter, and leads us past the false altars of our enemies, exalting us above all those who hate us. Adonai avenged us with miracles before Pharaoh, offered signs and wonders in the land of Egypt. God smote in anger all Egypt's firstborn, brought Israel from its midst to lasting freedom, and led them through the divided water of the Sea of Reeds. As their pursuers and enemies drowned in the depths, God's children beheld the power of the divine. They praised and acknowledged God's name. Malchuto beratzon kibelu alehem Moshe uMiriam uvnei Yisrael lecha anu shira b'simcha rabba ve'amru chulam mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh nora tehilot osei fele yadai 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 malchutecha ra'u banecha bokei hayam lifnei Moshe ze Eli anu ve'amru Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed v'ne'emar ki fada Adonai et Yaakov ugalo miyad chazak mimenu Baruch atah Adonai Gal Yisrael. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu lo l'chayim. U'shmor tzeitenu uvoenu l'chayim u'l'shalom me'ata ve'ad olam u'fros aleinu sukat shalomecha Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukat shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim. Please rise. V'shameru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat לדורותם ברית עולם ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ וביום השביעי שבת וינפש יתגדל ויתקדש מרבה ועלמא דברה חירותי והמליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן יהי שמי רבה מברך לעלם לעלמי עלמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי קודשה בריחו לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו amen. Silent Amidah begins on page 47. You may be seated when you're concluded with your Amidah. We rise on page 53 for the symbolic recapitulation of the Amidah. Vayichulu hashamayim v'haaretz v'chol tzevam v'yichal Elohim bayom hashvi'i melachto asher asa v'yishpot bayom hashvi'i mikol melachto asher asa v'yivarech Elohim et yom hashvi'i v'yikadesh oto כי בו שבת מכל מלאכתו אשר ברא אלוהים לעשות. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה, האל הגדול הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, קונה שמיים וארץ, מגן אבות בדברו, מחיי מתים במאמרו, האל הקדוש שאין כמוהו, המניח לעמו ביום שבת קודשו, כי בם רצה להניח להם, כי בם רצה להניח להם, לפניו נעבוד ביראה ופחד, ונודה לשמו בכל יום תמיד, מעון הברכות. אל ההודעות אדון השלום, מקדש השבת ומברך שביעי, ומניח מקדושה לעם מדושני עונג, זכר למעשה בראשית. אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, רצווינו חטאינו, קדשנו במצוותיך, ותן חלקנו בתורתך. שבענו מטובך, ושמחנו בישועתך, וטהר ליבנו לעבדך באמת. והנחילנו אדוני אלוהינו, באהבה וברצון שבת קודשך, וינוחו בישראל מקדשי שמך. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. יתגדל ויקדש ברבה, ועלמא דברך חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך, לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה יתברך, וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו, לעילה מן כה בחטא ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. תתקבל צורן ואורון לכל ישראל, קדם אבון נביא שמעיה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלום הרבה מן שמעיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. ויעשה שלום, ויעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ויעשה שלום, ויעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. ואמרו אמן. סברי? ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא פרי הגפן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר קידשנו במצוותיו ורצבנו בשבת קודשו באהבה וברצון הנחילנו, זיכרון למעשה בראשית, כי הוא יום תחילה למקראי קודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים. כי בנו בחרת ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, ושבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. And today is 11 days of Cheshvan. I'm counting. We're on page 56. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. על כן נקבל לך. ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא, יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד, ושמו אחד. We'll turn now to Kaddish Yatom on page 58. As we do, I want to make sure to mention today in our community, we're observing the Yortzites of Sophie Schnur, Nissan Rubinov, Sandy Schramm, and Henrietta Sells, mother of Steve, who's with us tonight. In the remainder of the week, we'll also be observing the Yortzites of Joseph Davidson, Sally Prager, Matilda Brenner, Morton Perlman, Gertrude Sass, Edward Ellis, Helen Schulman, Frank Payne Jr., Sarah Rosen, and Judy Mond. We also think at this time of those we've lost in the last 11 months, among them Ben Koff, Matt Yosefat, Peter Gabor, Sandy Richards, Kay Gaines, Irv Zipperstein, Elaine Nevins, Joan Dane, Eileen Chodesh, June Howard, Gerald Sapadin, Pam Simowitz-Weber, Hal Schneider, and Rosemary Bloom. If there's anyone else you're thinking of tonight and you'd like to share their name as well, I'll invite you to do so. Kaddish Yatel, Mourner's Kaddish is here on page 58. If you're reciting, please join me. Yikadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah. Ba'alama divra kirutei yamlich malchutei b'chayeichon u'b'yomeichon u'b'chayei l'chol Beit Yisrael ba'agala u'bizman kariv ve'imru amen. Yahei shmei Rabbah mevarach la'alam u'l'olamei alamaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnasei v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shmei t'gudsha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata Tushbachata v'nechamata da'amiran ba'alama ve'imru amen. Yahei shalom rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Osei shalom b'imromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Connie, would you like to share some announcements?
Always. Shabbat shalom, everybody, both to everybody here and everybody on the live stream. We have Shabbat services tomorrow. As I mentioned last week, we have embarked in the month of October, Mar Cheshvan, and a series of programs to nourish both your body and soul. I know a number of people attended this past week, and I hope we will continue to attend. Next Friday will be something a little bit different. Northern Hills is part of a consortium of other organizations welcoming younger people with families who are not necessarily affiliated with other congregations. We will be hosting young families with children for a free Shabbat dinner next week, I believe starting at 5:30. Yes, you have to be a family with young children in order to attend. But we look forward to participating with other institutions in the greater Cincinnati area who are doing this. As I understand, we will be hosting young families every other month for a period of time, which is really nice. Also, next week is a special sisterhood tea party, so to speak. Read the bulletin about it. And I don't know if there's anything else.
Okay.
So thank you all, and we look forward to hearing Professor Kalman.
And before we do, I just want to note we have, I see 3 anniversaries that are being observed here in the month of November. Is anybody in this room a November wedding that we did not? Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure. Something got left off of last month on our birthday list. So I wanted to make sure nothing got left off on this list. But nobody in this room. But Diana and Jonathan Cullen, Jeff and Lois Gushin, and Robin and Angelique Rubin, all celebrating anniversaries this month. So Mazal Tov to them. We wish them many, many more. And glad that I didn't miss anybody else, which is good. We will conclude with Yigdal. We're on page 62 for Yigdal, and then I will be very happy to call Dr. Kalman up for tonight's lesson, tonight's teaching. Yigdal, page 62. Yigdal Elohim Chai ve'yishtabach nimtza b'nei remtziuto echad ben yachin ki yichudo nelam v'gam ein sof le'achduto ein lo dmut haguf ve'eino guf lo na'aroch elav kedushato kadmon l'chol davar asher nivra rishon ve'en reshit le'reshito ino Adon olam b'chol notzar yoreh gedulato malchuto shefa nevuato netano el anshe sgulato v'tifarto lo kam Yisrael kemo she'od navi umabit et tmurato torat emet natan le'amoel al yad nevio neman beito lo yachal Yifael v'lo Yamir dato le'olamim lezulato tzofe v'yodea setareinu mabit l'sof davar v'kadmato gomel ish chesed kemifalo noten l'rashara kirishato yishlach l'ket yamin meshichenu lifdot mechake ket yeshuato meitim yechayel berochasto Baruch Hadei Ad Shem Tehilato Meitim Yechayel Beroch Chasdo Baruch Hadei Ad Shem Tehilato. With that, I'll bid everybody a Shabbat Shalom from a ritual perspective, and now invite Dr. Jason Kalman forward. His presentation this evening, if I've got this right, is Creating Marriages of Convenience, subtitled Dinah and Job, Joseph and Osnat. I am glad that I have this handy-dandy cheat sheet with me because I would not otherwise be able to tell you. I could tell you that he's a professor of classical Hebrew literature and interpretation, but I could not have told you that he was the Gottschalk Slade Chair in Jewish Intellectual History at HUC JIR here in Cincinnati. I think I mentioned, Jason, I mentioned you last week as my favorite sardonic Canadian. That I know personally. So, but good-natured sardonic Canadian. All the other ones I know are very, very ill-tempered. So, but they still say sorry frequently. Dr. Kalman actually turned me on to a love of a number of things, including, what was that I wrote? I wrote a paper on. It was good. A vote to Rabbi Natan. I probably do. I think it was a vote to Rabbi Natan, and I really, really enjoyed that. If you've ever studied Pirkei Avot and you say to yourself, this stuff is great, I love it, but is there more? The answer is yes. And digging into Avot to Rabbi Natan, it was kind of like reading the Talmud on Pirkei Avot. Which is horrible and historically inaccurate for so many reasons, but that's what it felt like. So without further ado, I'll be glad to invite Dr. Kalman here, and if you want to give us a little more of an overview on what you're thinking.
Shabbat Shalom. I am so grateful to be here amongst friends old and new. after 3 years of feels like 3 years of pandemic. It's very, very nice to be back with friends. My wife and I share 3 children. The youngest are 5-year-old twins. I am very grateful for this opportunity to be out. Before we start, I want to sort of offer a bit of a background to this so that there are no surprises. The Bible includes lots of wonderful stories and some very ugly ones. Tonight, we start in what I would call 2 ugly ones. The first is the horrific assault on Dinah in Genesis, who's carried off in what the ancients would have called the marriage by capture. She's taken to the house of her rapist, for lack of a better description, and he goes to negotiate the marriage with her brothers. They basically not only negotiate that marriage, but an agreement that they will forever intertwine their tribes if the men of the city of Shechem, where the assailant is from, all circumcise themselves. And on the 3rd day, when all those men are, according to the text, in pain, the 2 brothers, Shimon and Levi, who are 2 of the 12 children, come back and obliterate the men of the city. The other story we're going to is the lighter one. Job, in a series of actions, loses his crops, property, family, servants, but it's okay because he gets double at the end. He does get double at the end. It's not okay. But these 2 stories of rather tragic beginnings get intertwined for a variety of reasons having to do with marriages. And what I'd like to do tonight is take you into the middle of a project I'm working on. Often you hear from scholars who talk about something they've completed. This is something that grew out of something I've completed and is really a look at the way Jews and Christians competed over biblical characters in the Middle Ages. We like Abraham, you like that one, you take that one, we don't need him so much, we'll take this one, your saint's really a jerk, and they trade off on biblical characters. So what I'd like to do tonight is look at this back and forth as a way of looking at the way Jewish marriage was perceived from the outside. That is, what do the Jews think is important about marriage on the one hand? And how does it become an identity marker for the community on the other? So to start us off, I'm going to put us in 12th century France. Now, for my former student in the room, all right, the 12th century in France is the midst of Rashi's lifetime. Rashi, the great Bible commentator, lives in France from 1040 to 1105, the length of his lifetime, raises up students thereafter. The 11th and 12th centuries are, in the Ashkenazi world, the highlight of the Jewish intellectual engagement with the Bible. It also happens to be that the 12th century France is the epitome of Christian engagement with the Bible in that same period. And we know that because Jews spend time in the marketplace and Christian teaching is a public act, they're hearing what the Christians have to say. And the Christians who are suddenly in the 12th century interested in a Hebrew in a way they weren't before are starting to talk to Jews. Among the great scholars of the period is the first man on our sheet, Peter Comestor, Peter the Mangeur. He's known as the eater because he devoured books. He's a monk at the Abbey of Saint-Victoire, among the Victorines. and he is responsible for the Historia Scholastica, which becomes the textbook of Christian scholarship on the Bible for the next 3 centuries or so. It's translated into dozens of languages and circulates widely. And in his commentary on Joseph in Egypt, he comments on Joseph's marriage. Now, if you'll remember, when Joseph gets carried away by the Ishmaelite or Midianite merchants, he's taken down to Egypt, having been sold by his brothers, and he ends up in the service of a man named Potiphar, who is some sort of minister to the Pharaoh. There is a seduction scene and all sorts of things goes on. That's not what they're concerned about. They're concerned what happens later. So according to Peter Comester, writing in Latin, and for those of you who went to Walnut, you can work on that, he says, the Hebrews, that is the Jews, as an excuse for the marriage of Joseph to an alien born, that is, to an Egyptian woman, say that Job married Dinah, Jacob's daughter, after his punishment, and from her a daughter was born with Potiphar. So I taught this earlier today to a couple of students to see what needed tweaking, and they said you've got to put in family trees. So, here's our family tree to get us started. Jacob has 4 spouses, 2 who make it into the Amidah when we add women back, Rachel and Leah, and 2 concubines, Bilhah and Zilpah. Together they have 12 children, 11 sons and 1 daughter. Jacob and his wife Rachel have Joseph. Jacob and Leah have Dinah. Okay, so far on my family tree. Yeah. According to Peter Comester, the Jews teach that Dinah and Job have a daughter who marries Potiphar, who gives birth to Asnat, who becomes the wife of Joseph. Just follow the bouncing blue line. Okay? Which means Joseph's sister is his wife's grandmother. You'll recall, for those of you familiar with Leviticus, this is completely off limits. And why do they make this? Why does Peter Comester say they make this claim? They didn't want Joseph marrying an Egyptian woman. They wanted him marrying an Israelite woman, someone from within the family. So they created this narrative, according to Peter Comester, and I think there's a little bit of mocking going on here, that Job marries Dinah, and they have a granddaughter who ends up in Egypt at the same time that Joseph is there, and he functionally marries his great niece, I think. Problem solved. Let's go home. So the question is, did the Jews actually say this? Right? Comester asserts they did. And what I'd like to suggest is that he's not wrong, but he's not quite right. There are a series of marriages involving these characters in Jewish tradition, and what happens is he takes them and he mashes them all together and gets a narrative. So what I'd like to do is work backwards and take apart how we got here. Now, according to the rabbinic period Aramaic translation, probably from the 7th century or so, to Genesis, on the same verse about Asnad, Pharaoh changes Joseph's names to Migalet Amukod, right? And he gives him Asnat, the daughter of Pharaoh, whom Dinah had borne to Shechem as a wife, and to Shechem and the wife of Potiphar, prince of Tanis, had brought up to be his wife. And Joseph went forth ruler over the land of Egypt. Okay, now we have an even uglier story built in here. Okay? So now, having been accosted by Shechem, Dinah gets pregnant, has a child who is raised in Egypt that is given away, raised in Egypt by Potiphar and his wife, and then Joseph marries her. Okay? Now we've solved, from the interpreter's concerns, we have solved several problems. That is, I'm not sure I like the solution, but they've solved several problems in their mind. So what are their problems? For those of you familiar with the book of Job, Job has a wife. She shows up in chapter 2. She says, this unnamed wife, Job, maybe you should curse God and die. And he tells her to go away. She speaks as a foolish woman. There are a number of things that bother rabbinic interpreters. Anonymous characters are one of them. You can't have an anonymous character. So they try to figure out who he's married to. They go with Dinah because she's described, the wife in Job is described as one of the nivalot, one of the foolish women. And Dinah is described as having been a victim of a nivelah, of some sort of corrupt behavior performed by Shechem. And they tie the two together. So I've got a problem. I've got, after all the men of the Shechemites are killed, Dinah is single. A single pregnant woman bothers the rabbis. So I've taken care of the child, who's now going to be married to Joseph. Dinah remarries. She's tied to Job. Job doesn't have an anonymous wife anymore. Everything's solved. We all have this nice picture. Why? Now I've brought two people into the fold. Right? Job, who's got no identity in the book. He's just Job who lives in the East, not Jewish, not non-Jewish, not clear. Now he's married to Dinah. He's inside the family. The daughter of that who resulted from the rape is also inside the family. She's married to Joseph. Dinah is not single anymore. She's got someone to take care of her. The rabbis are happy. None of you are expected to be happy. Huh? But it does give us the beginnings of what are the things that concern the rabbis. Right? We have a child resulting from an assault with a single woman who can't take care of it, they say, on her own, who is now secured in a well-to-do family, and then married back into the original family. I don't like it, but it works for these purposes. I have Job, who's got an unidentified wife, who's now married to Dinah. Now, if you think Dinah is a good woman, this is great. Job's situation just improved. If you think she's a foolish woman, it hasn't improved. But they've taken care of a single character, and now she's not single anymore. She's married, and they prefer that. So now back to the Targum for a second. If you look at this family tree, all I have to do now is figure out how it is that Asnat, who was living with Jacob, ends up in Egypt. Right? If you're going to look for a family to take in this child, why take the child to a foreign family in Egypt and not keep her in the family altogether? Right? Wouldn't it be better, given that Jacob has 11 kids? Granted, 2 of them killed the father of the child and all his relatives, which complicates family dinners, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah. Why send her away to Egypt? So, according to Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, 8th or 9th century Midrash, when Jacob's sons, that is the other Dinah's brothers, found out that their sister was pregnant with Shem's child, they planned to kill the child. But once the child was born, Jacob, the child's grandfather, couldn't let that happen. So according to the Midrash, we turn to page 2. Jacob wrote the holy name of God on a golden plate, suspended about the neck of the child, and sent her away. She went her way. Everything is revealed before the Holy One who's watching all of this. And God sends Michael the angel to take her, guard her, and bring her to Egypt, to the house of Potiphar, because Asnat was destined to become the wife of Joseph. That is, this isn't all happenstance. The Midrash reads this as a divine plan from the beginning. Dinah is impregnated in an awful assault. The child will be set up to be cared for. She's going to end up looping back to the family. Now, the text says, the wife of Potiphar was barren, and Asnat grew up with her as a daughter. When Joseph came down to Egypt, he married her, as it is said, and he gave him to wife Asnat, the daughter of Potiphar. Now, barren is a standard trope amongst matriarchal women in the Bible. They didn't have to go this way. The Christian readers who relied on the Greek text of the Bible rather than the Hebrew know that there are two characters, and you can see part of the play going on here in Genesis. There's Potiphar, and there's Potipharah, priest of On, who's described in the text as a eunuch. In the Greek text, Potiphar and Potipharah are the same character. It's not the wife who's barren. Potiphar has been modified. Okay? So they could have chosen to go that route, but the barren story is a standard trope, what becomes a standard trope. Okay? And they're sort of rewarded with taking in this child who will now marry the prince of Egypt. But that still doesn't explain how it is that Joseph and Asnat got together. So, now we're back to the 12th century. Rashi has a group of students studying in the schoolhouse, and we have 6 manuscripts preserved from that period, which include the following teaching. Because she was from this is the students reporting. Because she was from the seed of Jacob, as Rashi explains in Parashat Vayishlach, that she was the daughter of Dinah by Shechem, and Jacob hung an amulet around her neck and sent her out, and she was brought to Egypt by way of an extraordinary miracle, and Potiphar raised her in his house, and for this she was called by his name, that is, Osnat Potiphar. When Joseph passed through the land of Egypt, all the women would come out to see his beauty. He's described as beautiful in the text. And each one would throw an article or an ornament at him, right, dropping the handkerchief, so to speak. But Asnat didn't have anything to throw, and she throws the amulet that's been hanging around her neck. When he looked at the amulet, with the name of God written on it by Jacob, he knows this is a sign, and he marries her. It's okay. She's one of us. Note who has disappeared in this story. You didn't notice. Job's gone. I don't need him at this point. Right? Because Asnat is not the descendant of Job. This goes back to to Dinah having been accosted. I don't need Job here. But now I've got 2 traditions floating around. I've got Dinah had a child who became or was Osnat with Shechem. I have a tradition that Dinah married Job. Do they conflict? Do I work them out? Peter Comester has already worked it out. He gets rid of Shechem. Now I've got a problem, because Rashi, in the version of Rashi that we have, doesn't teach this. Either his students got mixed up, or Rashi had taught something and then changed his mind. And in the Middle Ages, they lived with a concept called the open book. There's no printing. So I'm working on a book, I teach some things, I write them down, you come, you copy it from me, you take that version, but I keep working on it, and I go back and I change something. And then the next guy comes along and copies it, and now there's two versions of my thoughts from two different periods floating around, but you don't know the order. And some of the students clearly got the old version. In the newer version, this is what Rashi actually teaches about Osnat. No, we're not in the same chapter anymore. He makes his decision to put the child not in Egypt, but with Jacob on the way to Egypt. In Genesis 46, 8 to 10, we're told Jacob is going down to Egypt. We're told the names of his sons and the grandchildren who go with him. According to chapter 46, verses 8 to 10, these are the names of the children of Israel which came into Egypt, Jacob and his sons Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, and the sons of Reuben, Hanoch and Phalu and Hezron and Carmi. You can pick those if you're going to have grandchildren, you want to push them. And the sons of Shimon, Yemuel and Yamin and Ochad and Yachin and Zohar and Shaul, the son of the Canaanite woman. Which sounds funny. Why does he get a name? Why is this child distinguished from the others as Saul, the son of the Canaanite woman? According to Rashi, the son of the Canaanite woman means the son of Dinah. Hold on. Let's just back up here. So Shimon has Dinah's child, his sister's child. Right? Because you weren't confused before, that's why all the family trees are here. Right? We're at the very bottom of page 2, for those of you who are feeling lost. He says, what Rashi is saying is, no, the child of that original assault isn't Osnat in Egypt, as his students claimed, but rather is the Shaul, son of the Canaanite woman. So, the son of the Canaanite woman means the son of Dinah, who had been associated with a Canaanite, Shem. That is, she's not a Canaanite, but she gets painted with the brush of being like a Canaanite because she was with Shem. When they, that is the brothers, killed Shem, Dinah refused to leave the city of Shem until Shimon, that is her brother, swore that he would marry her. So, now her other brother is married to her, but there's an open question. You'll note it from my double lines and dotted lines below. It's not clear from this text if she's pregnant with Shem's child from the assault, and Shimon takes her in, or if he's the father with her of Shaul, the son of the Canaanite woman. Now, if you're thinking to yourselves, these marriages get more and more troubling as we go through this, you'd be right. No critique from this side of the podium. But what you're watching unfold is the remarkable twisting they're going through entirely for the purpose of solving the problem of getting the child back into the family and making sure that everyone's married to someone Jewish. They'll tolerate what would later be described as incestual marriages. Because, as you'll recall, who are the other Israelites when Jacob's sons are born? Think back for a second. We're in Genesis now. We haven't quite gotten there yet. Right? Jacob's family is the entirety of Israel. He's got 11 sons and 1 daughter. And if they're going to marry other Israelites, there's really only one option. right? It's hard to in-marry when there's only one family, unless you're watching Game of Thrones. So, now we've got a problem. Whose child is this Shaul ben Kanani? Now, in the middle of France, in the 11th century, Rashi's teacher was already trying to work out this problem. So, we're going to do a run-through of what he says. You'll need the family tree below. So, Moshe Hadarshan writes a book called Breshit Rabbati, the Great Genesis Tale, where he tries to work this out. We're on page 3. And he comments on Saul, the son of the Canaanite. Who, he says, is Saul, the son of the Canaanite woman? And now he's going to repeat some rabbinic traditions. According to the opinion of the one, that is of the rabbi, who said that the brothers married their sisters, there's some specificity in this. This one alone was the child of a Canaanite woman and not the others. Now you should be asking, what sisters? Go ahead.
What sisters?
Thank you. Okay. According to Genesis Rabbah, the Midrash from the late 4th or early 5th century on the book of Genesis, to solve the problem of the brothers outmarrying, each one was born with a twin sister unnamed. Then they could each marry their twin sisters across, because there's 4 wives who produce the kids. You can marry a half-sister, which isn't quite as bad. Right? And so I've got this midrash that says they all married their twin sisters, thus they're all in the family, quite literally. But that didn't work for everyone. According to the opinion of the other sage, who said the brothers took wives from the women of the land, what will they do with Saul, the son of the Canaanite woman? Okay, let's stop for a second. Now we see there's a debate. That is, there are the, what I would call the creative ones and the straightforward ones. The creative one says they had to have married in the family, so there must have been sisters for them to marry. And the other said, no, they had to marry outsiders. Right? That's just the way it worked. Right? If there's no one else to marry, that's who you're marrying. But if they're marrying outsiders, then every child is the child of a Canaanite woman. You're with me there from a literary perspective? That is, why would you specify, right? So if they all marry Israelite sisters, identifying a Canaanite woman, the child of a Canaanite woman, specifies that child is somehow distinct. If you marry all the Canaanite women, calling the child of the Canaanite woman doesn't offer any clarity. So if there's no clarity, he says, then who's the Canaanite woman? That guy says, this is Dinah, the daughter of Leah. He repeats the tradition we just heard. As Rav Huna teaches in the Midrash, at the time that Shimon and Levi took Dinah, their sister, from the house of Shem, she did not want to leave, saying, and I, where shall I carry my shame? Until Shimon, her brother, swore to her that he would take her as a wife, and after this she departed. Thus it is written, Saul, the son of the Canaanite woman. It doesn't continue on the next page because I squeezed the text together. Rabbi Judah says she acted, right, the question is, why is Dinah called the Canaanite woman? Rabbi Judah says she acted in the manner of the Canaanites. That is, she acted more like them than like her family. What's she accused of doing in the text? In the biblical text? It says, she goes out alone to town to see the women of the town. She's out frolicking from their perspective. Right? The implication being that she brought this on herself. Rabbi Nehemiah says, actually, he's more specific. He says, no, she was fornicating in the general manner of Canaanites. But after she became pregnant, Shimon divorced her after having fulfilled his vow. Which means she wasn't pregnant when Shimon marries her. which makes Shimon the father with his sister of Shaul ben Haknanit, Shaul the son of the Canaanite. So, now he marries her as he promised. She has a child which guarantees her security within the tribe. Now he can divorce her. And here's where Moshe Hadarshan solves the problem. And when Israel, that is Jacob, descended to Egypt, Jacob gave her to Job as a wife. But the rabbis say that Shimon took her as a wife and buried her in Canaan. So some disagree with that there was a divorce. This is Moshe Hadarshan's solution. He wants both midrashim to be true. So now I can have, following the family tree, Dinah escaping the home of Shechem, having a child, having been married to her brother Shimon, who is Shaul ben Haknanit. Now I've identified the character in Genesis chapter 46. At the same time, once she is secure, she can be divorced by her brother, and her father Jacob arranges another marriage for her, this time to Job. They can have children and solve the Asnat problem. Yeah. Now we've got three relationships created, right? Negotiated in all cases by men for her, so that they can have all the members of the family married in the family. No foreign contamination. It seems like a lot of strange work to do to avoid foreign contamination. So, how do we get Job mixed up in all of this? So, according to the Midrash, Shechem in Genesis chapter 34, on the top of page 4, rapes Dinah and, in its typically misogynistic way, the sages of the Midrash ask, for what sin was she violated by a foreigner? It is written, a friend owes loyalty to one who fails, though he forsakes the fear of the Almighty. Our father Jacob came along with the tribes, and Dinah was with him as well. This is when Jacob is traveling, and he's going to meet Esau, his brother. Book of Genesis. As soon as the messengers came saying, we came to your brother Esau, Jacob took Dinah and put her in a chest so that Esau would not see her and take her for a wife. Like if the stories weren't already ugly to begin with. Now, to avoid having his unpleasant brother marry his daughter, Jacob hides her in a trunk, and for doing this, he, not she, is punished by having his daughter raped by Shechem. Yeah, it bothers me too. Pardon me? It's a loss of honor story. The question is, what did Jacob really do here to bring this punishment upon himself? Apparently, putting your daughter in a box and not letting her marry your brother is an affront to the deity. The Holy One said to him, that is to Jacob, you withheld her from him. by your life, she is ready for an uncircumcised man. The term arel is uncircumcised is a way of describing foreigners in the biblical and rabbinic text. The one about whom it is written, a friend owes loyalty to one who fails. That is, you wouldn't give him to your brother, so we're going to hand her off to a foreigner. If she had married Esau, the text says, perhaps she could have converted him. That is, he was a misbehavior, he didn't take things seriously. Maybe if you had let your brother marry Dinah, she would have brought him into the fold. You prevented that. You interrupted that possibility. When Job took her to marry, and now the text is ambiguous. It's not clear if the text says she did not convert him, or did she not convert him? Two possibilities. That is, she converted him or she didn't convert him. So, if she converted him, then the story is saying if you had married Esau to her, she wouldn't have been raped by Shem, and she wouldn't be married to Job now. She would have been married to Esau, and he would have been inside the family instead of outside the family. Or alternatively, she didn't convert him, and now your daughter's married to a non-Jew foreigner. But you could have had him she could have been in the family. Note, she's a pawn in all the stories. Right? This is about men's honors, men's families, men's ties. She's moved around and married off to people to create alliances. And it's because they don't think much of her. In our final text, according to the Aramaic Targum on Job, translating the lines we discussed, say to God, curse God and die, and he says, you're one of the foolish women. They add, his wife Dinah said to him, they insert the Dinah into the text. His wife Dinah said to him, are you still holding fast to your integrity? Bless the Memra of the Lord and die. And he said, and they expand what he says, you talk as any woman who acts shamefully from the house of her father talks. Since we accept good from before the Lord, shall we not accept evil? Shameful from the house of her father? The rabbis have Job taking her in as a favor. The text here flips from she could have converted to Job to the pious Job is taken in this foolish woman, maybe he'll rub off on her. She went out to the city. She frolicked. And she continues to speak foolishly. Good thing we found this guy to take her in. Glad he put her in her place, the text says. All for the sake of keeping it in the family. That is, when it comes down to it, Commester's push that what the Hebrews are doing is not really biblical interpretation, it's imposing communal ideology onto the text. It's exactly what they're doing. How do we make the bloodlines pure? How is it that the biblical characters who all seem to marry foreigners could end up with a community with rules that says you only marry inside? The answer? They never really married outside. You've been misreading the text. If you're reading closely, you'll know that the assaulted Dinah was taken in by her brother, impregnated by her brother, divorced by her brother, taken in kindly through an arranged marriage with by her father with Job, and kept in Egypt. And she lived happily ever after. It misses a piece of the story. If Job's wife Dinah is the one speaking in verse 2:9, then the loss of the property, the loss of the children, and the loss of the servants were her losses too. That is, the tragedy of her life continued when she got to Job's house. But don't worry, because they get new kids at the end of the book. These are not the Bible stories we normally tell or normally hear. Probably for good reason. But I think in looking at the ugly ones, much as looking at the real grim fairy tales, tells us something about the people who shared them that telling the happy stories doesn't tell us. That is, these are the stories of the intellectual labor that went into refashioning a text in the image of the community. In a post-temple destruction Jewish community, in a post-crusade Jewish community, when a minority was oppressed by the outsiders, when rape was used by a weapon by the oppressors, how you took care of the women left, how you took care of the children left, became a topic of discourse that looks ugly because it was ugly. But they're negotiating real communal life through these texts. And it's a side of the text we don't usually get to see. So I'm happy to take questions. I'm sorry to leave you on a down note, but I think it's fair to say that the struggles over identity in marriage continue. Who's okay? Who's not okay? Who's in? Who's out? Whose children are in? Whose children are out? Is not gone away. I hope we found a more compassionate way to deal with it than the rabbis did before us. So thank you for giving me a chance to explore some different texts with you. I can go back and do a happier one if you want. Questions? Concerns? Go ahead.
Maybe I'm stuck at the beginning, but this whole issue of Job, I don't think of Job as somebody active in the biblical narrative until in the time of the prophets and so forth. So I'm wondering how that gets to get around that.
The rabbis of the Talmudic period don't imagine Job that late. There is a single tradition in the Babylonian Talmud that Job comes back from the Babylonian exile and sets up a study house in Tiberias, but that's the exceptional text. The preferred position in rabbinic sources is that that the book of Job is written by Moses about someone he basically knew in the Pharaoh's palace who lived before him. So they set Job in the late patriarchal period when Jacob's down in Egypt. Okay? And one of the ways you can secure the chronology is by marrying him to Dinah. Now, for those who are interested, I won't swear there's anyone who is in the room, but for those who are interested, beginning in the 13th and 14th century, and certainly by the 15th century, the marriage of Job and Dinah becomes very important to Renaissance chronographers. I'll take that as a sign. In any case, in the 14th and 15th century, amongst the chronographers, particularly amongst the Jesuit chronographers of France, this marriage becomes very important. The major topic of the day is how do you work out the chronology of the text year by year, going back to creation. And Job, because there is no biographical data in the book, they rely on the marriage of Job and Dinah from rabbinic tradition as the linchpin for putting Job into the chronology. And in the 18th century, the first major magazine in the English language is called the Gentleman's Magazine. It's published in England. And in 1795, they publish a family tree, dated. This is the year this one was born, this was the year one was married. And Job and Dinah's marriage is right on there with the date. Yeah. So this becomes part of popular knowledge. There are plays written by Germans and French playwrights in the Spanish playwrights in the 15th and 16th century, all about Job. Dinah is always the wife amongst Christians. Right? That's part of the popular Christian imagination. And then later Christians come back and say that's just a Bubba mindset the Jews made up to entertain their kids. I don't think this is entertaining. Other questions? In that case, thanks for letting me back. You may not let me back again. Go ahead.
I wanted to say, I noted that...
Sorry, you were in my peripheral vision.
No, it's okay. The lack of concern for the principle of all of the outlaw keeping the entirety, etc. That's interesting. That stood out to me.
It does. So there is a tension between the observance of the commandments and when Gilui Arayot kicks in. Right, that's the sexual prohibitions of Leviticus. And I think the answer to it is simply the case of if you don't marry in the family, you've got to marry foreigners. Note, even Sarah, based on the timeline, is Abraham's perhaps really half-sister. Right. We just tend to read those genealogies quickly, so we don't have to deal with them. It's in there. But it is part of the tension of trying to interpret a text when you want it to solidify a current set of beliefs. Right? If you want to argue that in marriage is essential, having all the patriarchs and their siblings marry foreigners becomes a difficult model to share. Right? Because it basically gives tacit approval to it. So that's what they're struggling with, and they create an awfully ugly story to preserve it. Shabbat shalom. Sorry?
Well, just, marrying within the clan, Laban has other children. I'm surprised that they're not considered as a possibility for wives for the unknown lives of Jacob's children. That's so convoluted. Oh, we have these twin sisters.
They do, but remember that they don't leave Laban on good terms.
I understand. But meanwhile, the kids got married.
Yeah. Pardon me? Right. Sort of in the family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of family members out there to marry and keep it in the greater clan.
And you choose one option or another. But I mean, I think it's part of the issue we forget is that there are often multiple perfectly good interpretations. The one you choose is not for any rational reason beyond it's the one that appealed to you.
Yeah.
Shabbat shalom. You could have avoided all of this. Yeah. Does power go off on this one?
Yeah, it should. Yeah, it's good. All right. I noticed.
Oh, I left out all the other Christians. Come back here. Yeah, so we had started in the Christian circles. All of the manuscripts that we have of pseudo-philos are from France and Germany in the 12th, 13th century. Pseudo-philos, the first spot where we had Germany in America. It's not Philo. It's not. It's definitely not Philo. The manuscripts circulated with other texts by Philo. So the church these church guys think Philo's taught this. And because the Jews and Philo, who is an honorary church father, taught this thing, you can choose to adopt it.